Hello everyone. In this video, I will go over the lab which will need to be carried out in your week 12, the lab 10, which is mainly related to advanced SQL embedding code using triggers, stored procedures, and functions. So in this lab, we are looking at the explanation of the user-defined functions, and we'll be creating a simple user-defined functions. The trigger, what are the triggers are, the simple trigger, we'll be creating them. We'll look at the stored procedures, and you'll also create a stored procedures. So mainly in this lab, we do not have any handouts for this topic because we'll be covering more in detail later on ACID 3910. So in this lab, and we have all the handouts, all the explanation is given. I already have created one video where I have explained all the concept in more detail. You can read this document in order to understand in much better what are each of the concepts are. But I already have covered in one of my session already, so I will not repeat in this lab. This lab is mainly overview of what need to be carried out or what type of SQL statements will be executing or testing in this lab. So in order to carry out this lab, you have to first of all you have to drop your existing URI schema. And in order to drop your schema, you can use whether one by one you can delete your tables because there may be a cascade, or you will see that how it will refrain you to delete the tables. Majority of the time, you have to first delete the table which consists of the primary keys and then the foreign keys. If you are not doing that, if you're dropping the entire schema by using a drop schema name of schema, you have to just define that. You don't have to give me, it's not necessary that you have to give me on your tables. Both of them are correct way of doing it. But actually, if you are thinking about what are the optimal solution here in order to delete the entire schema, it is actually a drop schema itself. Once you have dropped it, you are creating your schema again. You will download the script from the lab 10 and you will be loading the script and you'll populate all the tables which is given in the script and you'll be checking that all the tables are created successfully or not. So this is your first task in order to start with the lab 10. Once you're done, here we are starting with the user-defined functions. We said that whenever we have, it is also several built-in SQL functions, which is mainly deal with the computation. As I mentioned in my previous session, that it will be consist of an aggregate functions. It can be min, max, count, sum, average, and so on. So these all are the ones, or these are all the functions which are mainly used inside the functions. So now here we will look at how we can create a user-defined function. So we have mentioned that we have to give it a name. So before we start, we are looking at the example. We are saying that whenever we are creating a function, we always create this function to reuse that code again and again. So I'm giving you example here. So we had initially select first name, last name from customer. This is something we have done in your lab too. So we said that we can retrieve information about the first name and last name separately as an attribute, or we can combine them together, merge them together, or concatenate them together in order to have a full name as well. Okay. So which means we can combine two attributes or three attributes together to have or create a new attribute out of them. So this is something you have to do. So first part, this is where I'm asking you to provide a SQL query that should display the following result. You don't have to submit anything here, but just for you to remember that you have to use concat first name. You need to have two opening and closing of the single quotation between with space in between and the last name in order to create a full name. And then you have to give it a name as full name. This is something you have done in your lab too. Why should we do that? Why in this lab we are saying that instead of keep repeating the same code for differing relation of different tables, we are just creating it as a function. So now what we are doing is that we are saying that we are creating a function which will concatenate all the values, for example the last name first name, together for any entities which have these two attributes. So now let's look at the function. So I already have given you all the description of each part. I'm just going over each of them in more detail. So whenever we are creating any function, so now the clauses which are by default you need to have in the function, I will be highlighting for you, so you know that which part you need to be included by you and which part you can just have it as by default. So delimiter is something is which need to be there by default. So your code should start with delimiter, space, and semicolon, and ends at delimiter, space, and semicolon. And it need to have a special characters. It can be a dollar sign or it can be any of the special characters. It can be backslash or forward slash. It's up to you what type of special character you want to use as a delimiter. So now what exactly the delimiter is? Your MySQL doesn't recognize that where exactly your function ends. So I'm talking about the MySQL. MySQL recognize each statements that whenever there is a semicolon, your function or any of the SQL statement ends here. So if we look at this code, your semicolon, the first semicolon used here is in this part, which means that your system will, if you are not using a delimiter as a starting point and ending point, your MySQL will recognize that your code ends here, which means that it will not execute the rest of the code. So we need to make MySQL understand that we have a starting point and we have an ending point in terms of delimiters, delimiter and the special characters. Okay. Now what we have it here. So we are starting with creating a function. Once we have defined our delimiter, we are starting to define our function or create a function. In order to create a function, we use a clause called as a create function. This is also default syntax. We need to name our function any name you want to. Here I have given a name as a first name first. We have two parentheses in order to define our parameters here. So parentheses are here. Inside these parameters or inside this parentheses, we need to identify a parameters. So these are our parameters, which is actually called as an attribute in the databases. You can name it as you want to. Mostly we use a var. If you have used Node.js or you may have used JavaScript, you have may notice that we use a var to define a variable. So var first name and var last name. As we are saying that we are creating a function which will concatenate these two parameters, so these two attributes. So we need to define both of them. So first name, last name, data type and data size should be exact match from your tables. So if it is char, it should be char. If it is 30, it should be 30 here. Okay, we separate it by a comma. So that's why if you remember when I have given you feedback for your project phase two or when we were implementing or creating our tables, I said that you have to be consistent across the tables. Why you have to be consistent across the tables? So for example, if your phone number is int, it should be int everywhere. Why? Because in case if we have created a function and we want to reuse for the multiple tables which have similar attributes, we can use it. We do not have to keep changing our data type and data sizes for each of the variables we have. Okay, so that's why we have to make sure it is consistent across all the tables we have created. Now, once we have done, now we have something called as a returns. Returns, data type, and size. First, I will look at the data size here, which is 60, which is a combination of both of the first name, last name. 30, 30, which is 60, which means it is 60 here. Now for the varchar, as you know that the first name and the last name to be a char, but here we are saying as a varchar because we are saying that there are chances that they may have included a number in any of the entities which has a first name and last name. Okay. It is not necessary, it is the name of a person. So it can be anything can be there. So we have to make sure we are thinking about that what are the possibilities of the data type can be there for other type of entities. So we said it is a voucher here. So this data type and size is for the outcome or as an output. We started with a deterministic. This is another clause here, and then we our function actual function starts from begin and ends at end. In order to create our function or start writing a computation code inside a function, we have to first declare our variable which we want it to be as an output. So we are saying that we have a declare and we are naming it as a var full name. Varchar 60, it should be exact same how we have mentioned here. Ends with semicolon. Set means it is a part of the computation. So we are saying that we are having a varchar. It should be the same as declare variable. Var full name should be equal to concat. Our trim var first name, here we should have a space, as I we cannot see space here, it should have a space. Our trim var last name in semicolon. So now we haven't covered our trim earlier. So our trim means that the right trim, which means that we want to remove a space before a first name and before a last name. So anything in their right as a space, it will be trimmed. So that's why we're using R trim. In case if we want to remove a spaces from the left side, we use L trim, left trim. Okay. Now once we are done, we have to return our outcome, which is our final attribute, which is a full name. So this is how you will be writing a function. So this is a creation of the function. Now how you can call it? You can call it by using a select, the name of the function which we have created here, and then you can write the parameters. Make sure the order of them is exact same how you have given in your function. So if you go back here, your first name is first and the last name is second. So it should be in the correct order as full name and from the customer. So now what you have to submit for your lab, you have to explain for me the each keyword, which I already have explained to you. Also have given you explanation here. You have to give me provide a screenshot of your output when you're calling your function. This is what is called as a calling of the function, and this is what is called as a creation of a function. Now, what else? You have to use the function, this function for the different table, which is artist. So you have to see that whether it's working or not, and then you have to call your function as well. Okay. So this is something you have to do for the function. I can show you an example here. So let's say I want to create a function. So before we start creating a function, I can show you that we already have covered so far the tables and views last time. The views is different from the functions because views creates or stores SQL select statements, whereas the function store procedures deal with other type of operations as well. Now for now we are covering the store procedures and functions. We do not have any functions here. Let me refresh it. You can say no function store procedures. Now I want to create my function. It's the exact same for which I have given to you in your file, in your lab file, executed, and you can see here it is created now. Refresh it and you can find the first name first in the function of the view rich database. Now how I can call the function. I can call the function by using a select statement, name of the function, which is the first name first, parentheses. Inside parentheses, I have to make sure I have the correct format of my first name and last name, which I'm trying to concatenate as full name from customer. Once you execute it, you can see here the full name will be executed. In case if you want to do it for the different, you want to reuse the same function for different entities such as artist, would execute it, and you can see here we are using the same function for the different type of tables, different tables. This example is very simple, but as we are saying that we are not moving ahead with more advanced concept, but you have to remember that this is how the function should be created. This is a simple example for you. Now I want you to try, because you will have 5 marks question related to functions and 5 marks related to procedures or the triggers. Okay, so this is something which we'll cover in your final exam. So you have to make sure you're practicing your lab questions well, so you will be able to solve it. So let's look at, I will give you one question here. So you can try to create a function which concatenate, let me see the customer attributes here. So I want to create an address, so which will be street, which will be city, state, zip code, postal code, and country. Okay. You can name it as, and name your function as full address. Okay. So this is something I want you to try for the function.